Morning to you, Senator.
Good morning, Margaret.
I know you sit on the Armed Services Committee and the Foreign Relations Committee, but what we just heard from the Pentagon was that Congress was notified after the strike on Iran was concluded, after the U.S. jets are back and in safety. Is this sufficient?
Margaret, no. Congress needs to authorize a war against Iran, this Trump war against Iran. We have not. Congress should be consulted with it. We were not. And Congress needs to be notified, not after the fact, but in advance. We were not. That's why I've filed a war powers resolution that will ripen and be brought to a vote on the floor of the Senate this week. Senator Schumer is working with Leader Thune to make that happen. The United States should not be in an offensive war against Iran without a vote of Congress. The Constitution is completely clear on it. And I am so disappointed that the president has acted so prematurely. The foreign minister of Israel said Friday night that its own bombing campaign had set the Iranian nuclear program back, quote, at least 2 or 3 years, close quote. There was no urgency that suggested, while diplomatic talks were underway, that the U.S. should take this unilateral action by President Trump's orders yesterday.
Well, the vice president was on another network earlier this morning and said, we are not at war with Iran. We are at war with Iran's nuclear program. There seems to be a lot of legal parsing on the definition of the word war here. What do you make of that description?
I think it's BS, and I think anybody hearing it would conclude the same thing. When you're bombing another nation, ask them if they think it's war. They do. Would we think it was war if Iran bombed a U.S. nuclear facility? Of course we would. And the U.S., you know, we've invaded 2 neighbors of Iran, Afghanistan and Iraq, to topple their regimes since 2000. Those were wars. This is the U.S. jumping into a war of choice at Donald Trump's urging, without any compelling national security interest for the United States to act in this way, particularly without a debate and vote in Congress. We should not be sending troops and risking troops' lives in an offensive war without a debate in Congress.
Well, just on the facts, though, the president has not authorized ground forces. In fact, he said he really doesn't want to send in ground forces. When it came to what was just described to the public by the Pentagon, it was really characterized as limited in scope. It sounds like you believe those early hour descriptions are going to turn out to be false.
I do. The War Powers Resolution says that a member of Congress can challenge the president if the president initiates hostilities against a foreign nation. Doesn't use even though the title is War Powers Resolution, the statute says if you initiate hostilities without congressional authorization, even a single member of the House or Senate can force a vote on the Senate floor. There is no doubt that the U.S. sending this massive set of Tomahawk missiles and B-2 bombers and bunker busters on 3 Iranian nuclear sites is hostilities. Now, again, some in the Senate may say this is great and we want to vote for it. I happen to think that getting into a 3rd offensive war in the Middle East in the last 25 years is absolutely reckless and foolish. And I'm going to be doing everything I can to convince my colleagues of that. I may or may not succeed. But Congress should have the debate and vote on this before we escalate the risk to American troops, which this action has done.
We know that prior to this action, Northern Command had already directed additional security measures on all U.S. military installations. You've got a lot of military installations in Virginia. What do you know about the threat to the homeland at this point?
We're going to have a briefing Tuesday, Margaret, and I'll learn more then. But what I do know, I also have a lot of Virginians deployed in the Middle East. There are about 40,000 U.S. troops deployed all over the Middle East, sailors on Navy ships in the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, folks in land bases in Syria and Iraq. And yes, this action dramatically raises the risk to them. And the question is, for what? If the Iranian nuclear program, Vice President Vance says it's a war against their nuclear program. Of course, we had curtailed that diplomatically a few years ago until Donald Trump tore up the diplomatic deal. But even if you needed to wage war, when the Israeli foreign minister is saying we've set the nuclear program back at least 2 or 3 years, why launch this strike, escalating risks to Americans and American troops over the weekend with no real discussion with Congress, no real debate before the American public. I don't want to be lied into another war in the way we were with Iraq in 2002.
Thank you, Senator. We'll be back in a moment.